Welcome to This Week in Local, a Localogy podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Localogy analysts Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin.
Hello, and welcome to This Week in Local. I'm Charles Laughlin, senior analyst at Localogy, joined by my colleague Mike Boland. Mike, how's it going today?
Hey, Charlie, going well.
All right, Mike, so what's on your mind?
So I am looking at this week SMB profit margins, and particularly how they vary across verticals. So as quick background, we often look at the challenges of the SMB sector and sort of addressing it from a SaaS perspective, both in, selling into it and then developing products for it. And one of the classic challenges we often discuss is it's terribly fragmented, right? It's a massive market, but the revenue opportunity is chopped up into millions of little buckets. And then a second challenge, which gets more to what I'm talking about today, is that it's so varied, right? I mean, you have so many verticals or headings, as we used to call them. And there's just different pain points and dynamics across that vast range. And one of the things under that umbrella, again, that I'm looking at now is the variance in profit margins. And one of the points of this exercise is to sort of point out how it's so varied, and that also that should sort of inform the sort of strategies of SMB SaaS players that are sort of selling into these different buckets. So anyway, getting into the data, and this comes from various sources like the SBA and actually DoorDash, of all people, had some great data that I sort of pulled for this exercise. And what we're looking at here, just for the sake of definitions, is net profit margin. So, the bottomest of the bottom line, not things further up the P&L like EBITDA and gross margin, but net profit margin, just to give sort of a consistent meter stick to these different verticals. So at the high level, the overall average among SMBs we're finding is around 7 to 10% as a net profit margin. Now, of course, again, it then splits off into different directions when you look at all these different verticals. And it's impossible to look at every vertical, so we're looking at a representative sample. So restaurants, liquor stores, pet stores, grocery stores, convenience stores, and flower shops. So quick sort of exercise here, Charlie. Among those, and again, I'll read them again. What do you think has the highest?
I thought you were going to do this. Okay.
Highest margin: restaurant, liquor stores, pet stores, grocery stores, convenience stores, or flower shops?
I'm going with flower shop.
Okay, that's actually correct. So, and I'll get into why in a second. Let's do the same thing again. What do you think is the lowest?
I want to say restaurants, but I'm going to go with liquor store.
Okay, so restaurant is near the bottom of the list. Liquor stores are actually near the top of the list, up there with
I'm
flower
way
shops.
off. Okay, sorry about that.
That's fine. No, you nailed the first one, so that's good. So I'll go into a little bit of the details here. So, flower shops is the highest. The lowest is actually grocery stores.
Oh, I should have known that. Yeah.
Yeah, so flower shops is around 20%. Grocery stores are down around 1 to 3%.
Yeah, I was going to say 2% was my understanding. Okay.
Yes. So if you look at those two together,
restaurants is like 3, 4.
Restaurants it varies widely, but it's around 3 to 5%.
Okay.
3 to 5% for full service restaurants, and then if you get into like pizzerias and ghost kitchens, it goes up to 15%. But anyway, I want to go back to the top and bottom ones because I think there's an interesting sort of comparison there. So again, grocery stores at the bottom at 1 to 3%. Flower shops at the top at 20%. And they're sort of the inverse of each other. Flower shops being a high margin, low volume business. Grocery stores being the opposite, low margin, high volume business. Now, one of the reasons flower shops has such high margins is there's sort of market tolerance for very large markups. It's a premium product, whereas grocery stores, it's a high volume commodity product. So a lot of the things stand to reason. Now, if you look at, again, we talked about liquor stores. They're the second highest at 15 to 20% on average. And the reason for that is that, once you hear this list of reasons, it makes sense. There's also inherently high markups with liquor. You have low inventory spoilage. That's a big one. And then also, let's face it, it's a demand-proof, recession-proof, all season product with that, happens to be an addictive product, you might add. So anyway, there's a wide range here. Restaurants, again, it's like 0 to 15%, but for full service, it's at the low end. For pizzerias, high end. And then in the middle, I won't go through them all, but we have pet stores and convenience stores. Those are, sort of in the middle of the list.
Yeah.
So again, like this is sort of a thought exercise to sort of feel out not only the variance, but the reasons. And then also that just sort of gets the mind working on how all these things change and how there's such a wide variance. And again, the sort of moral of the story is SMB SaaS vendors, when looking at not only profit margins, but other things like cash flow, right? Cash flow varies widely if you're an inventory-based business like a retail store versus, a dog walker or a dentist. So it's really just an exercise to point out that challenge, that inherent challenge of addressing the pain points and financial dynamics of such a wide range of businesses for anyone that's in the business of the broad category of what we call SMB SaaS.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. I guess the reason I thought liquor store was going to be low margin because I thought it was in the same kind of vein as convenience stores and grocery stores where everyone sort of knows the price of everything. So the prices can't vary. But you're right. You can mark up fine bourbon and good, nice wine. I wouldn't say infinitely, but you certainly have some leeway there, some substantial leeway. So that makes sense. And what's interesting, though, is that I'm not sure that margins and wealth creation with a certain vertical are necessarily the same thing, because you can get very rich in restaurants. And I don't know that you necessarily all get that rich in flowers, but you have higher margins. But if you own 5 or 6 restaurants that are operating very well and have those 3 to 5% margins, but you have enough volume, you can generate a lot of money.
Yeah, and the other independent variable there, as I mentioned, is volume, and a subset of volume is frequency. You go out to dinner a lot more often than you buy flowers. You go grocery shopping more than all the above.
Sure. Yeah. Liquor, yeah. You can make a case, I think, probably for the frequency and et cetera. But yeah, flowers, it's a seasonal, it's a situational, or there's Valentine's Day, there's the holidays, there's birthdays, and
you could be
in trouble.
You could be getting flowers a lot if you're constantly in the doghouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Depends how often. Anyway, yeah, that's some interesting stuff. So I'm going to move to something that's completely different. Now for something completely different. I'm going to trot out one of my favorite dead horses and give it a couple of swift kicks, but with a slightly different twist. I'm going to talk about buy now, pay later, but I'm also going to talk about how 2024 is going to be an IPO year. And so Klarna, a company we've talked about from time to time, kind of one of the big cheeses in buy now, pay later, a Swedish company, is by all accounts said to be readying an IPO for sometime this year. And what is interesting is some of the moves it's making in advance of the IPO. Now, sort of backing up a little, we've kind of talked about how this year, last year and a half, 2 years, been tough for venture funding, and IPOs have been pretty dormant as well. And I think what everyone is sort of saying is this year venture might improve a little, but it's not going to we're not going to have another venture bubble yet, at least. But the IPO market is, by many accounts, supposed to be coming back. There's a lot of companies that have been sort of hesitating or waiting are said to be jumping back in this year for IPOs, Klarna being one. Another company we don't talk about on the podcast, but we write about from time to time, Service Titan, a big player in SMB software, said to be readying an IPO as well. Those are 2 good examples of companies that are sort of in our wheelhouse. But what's interesting about Klarna, other than the fact that it went from a $45 billion valuation to a $7 billion valuation, most of that happened in 2022. Right now, it's sort of sitting in that $7 billion zone. What it'll raise through its IPO, we'll see. But But what it's doing is it's trying to do something you talk about a lot, which is achieve revenue diversification in advance of the IPO in order to prove that the business is more than a one-trick pony, even if that one trick being buy now, pay later, is pretty popular, and popularity of it is growing because millennials want shoes, and buy now, pay later is one way to get them, even if you can't afford any more shoes. So that aside, what Klarna is doing is they're trying to launch a subscription product. If that sounds a little bit familiar, we talked a while back about Affirm trying the same thing, probably for similar reasons. Affirm is already a public company, but I'm sure it's scrambling to say, how do we, diversify this business, make this business look a little more interesting, have more streams of revenue, et cetera. Things all companies go through, right? All companies of any scale go through, at least. And so the Affirm subscription product, which we talked about on the podcast, I forget when, a while ago, never got off the ground. And I remember saying on the pod, wow, what an unimpressive set of features in this subscription product that never launched. It was just a lot of nothing. I forget what was in it. But the Klarna product, which they're calling Klarna Plus, which kind of made me roll my eyes because, I know it's easy to knock people who have hard jobs like CMO of a big company, but just throwing plus on something to make it your product, that seems a bit hackneyed, to be honest with you. But anyway, Klarna Plus, they're rolling it out, and what they're doing is it's $7.99 a month, and it gets you things like fee waivers, which might make some. This is aimed at power users of buy now, pay later. I'm not sure I'd ever want to be known as a buy now, pay later power user. That aside, it's aimed at the people who use the service a lot, so that waiving fees, curated access to discounts from the Nikes of the world, that only the subscribers get access to these discounts, things like that, for $7.99 a month. And again, this sounds a little more compelling than what Affirm rolled out or tried to roll out and never actually rolled out, but it still doesn't make me get up and dance. Let's just say that. And I'm wondering how many consumers will say, "Oh, $8 a month sounds great. I get an occasional break on sneakers from Nike." Whatever. And I think what it speaks to is something that this industry and a lot of industries struggle with, which is how to sort of change the narrative about their industry. And with buy now, pay later, there's the toxic narrative, which we've talked about a lot. Don't have to go through that again, getting people to spend money they don't have, that kind of stuff. That gets talked about a lot. We don't have to beat that dead horse again. But the other narrative is that it's kind of a commoditized product in a way that, everyone kind of does it the same way. There's not a lot of variation in, we do buy now, pay later differently. There's not really a different way to do it. There's some things around the edges, I suppose, but it's basically the same everywhere. So how do you diversify this business, which has multiple players? Now one of the big ones wants the IPO. IPO is in a lot of ways a marketing exercise because you have to show this business to investors and make investors excited about it. Part of that, I think, is showing that you're different and that you do this differently. And I think in this industry, trying to find a path to diversification of the product is one way to do that. We've seen efforts to try to rename it, alternative finance and alternative payments and things like that, instead of calling it buy now, pay later, or they talk about themselves as payments companies and fintech companies. Okay, fine. But that's a lot of just window dressing. And this is sort of at least a half-hearted effort to do something more than window dressing. But I don't see it as a particularly inventive way to go about it. Anyway, Mike, that was my rant, and that's for the week on the fintech space.
Yeah, interesting. So I think in addition to diversification, it's de-risking because the buy now, pay later business model is at the mercy of so many macroeconomic conditions, like interest rates, like the lending environment,
which were not cut this week, by the way.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, and I think that's logical to get into subscriptions. It's something that's reliable, it's recurring, all those things. But also, this brought to mind something that I think I saw Klarna do a few months ago, which I thought was in this same spirit of diversification, where, and it's also logical, it took something that it already had and just spun it in a new direction. What it did was, because it's planted within the checkout flow of so many different retailers or online retailers, it decided, okay, we can just take that positioning and then flip it, and we can make our own e-commerce front end. And essentially what they're becoming is an affiliate marketing partner to all of those places they're already embedded. And the beauty of that is anyone can become an affiliate marketing partner of Amazon and, name your e-commerce store, because they just provide the affiliate links that you will automatically get. There's a small setup to do it where it can just like pay you out, but they basically set themselves up as a front end to catch user demand and then, sort of have a store there. And they just utilize that position that they already had, where they were embedded already with all of these sort of online retailers, and just sort of position themselves, further up the stack. So I thought that was interesting too. So you can tell they're reaching.
Yeah, that's a better example of diversification, perhaps, than this.
They're both
kind of a lame subscription product. Yeah. And another time on this pod, we talked about how they're, and again, I was just citing an interview their CMO did, and I've seen nothing of this since, is that they toyed with the idea of somehow getting into retail media, and I still didn't. And when we talked about it on the pod, I don't think I had a really good answer for how they would go about that. And it looks like they haven't pursued it. So I think that was just something that floated in an interview that the CMO kind of bit at a little bit, made it seem like that was in their plans, and nothing happened. So, but, we'll see, we will see if the public markets, the investors look at this as, okay, finally, the firm is public, so they have had their hands on this space, and it's part of Block, which again, Square. So there are, there are public options for investing in buy now, pay later. This will be a big addition to that, and investors' support of this may have a lot to do with what we've just been talking about. How de-risked is this business? How diversified is this business? And if it's just BNPL and it lives or dies by that, I think investors will be wary. So I think that's what's behind what you described Klarna did, and what I just described that they're planning to do. I don't know if they'll come out with a couple more bells and whistles before the bell rings. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, investors are all about confidence and reliability, and the directions they're going, move them away, and again, de-risk them from some of those things that tend to make investors nervous.
Yeah. So, Mike, you want to move on to who won the week? What do you have this week?
Sure. So I'm naming Apple. On Friday, it was the launch day for the long-awaited Apple Vision Pro. This has been 10 years in the making in terms of rumors and R&D and billions in spending. And it finally reached that milestone. Not only is it just inherently a milestone, but also the early reviews that were out last week to, press review units to like influencers have been overwhelmingly positive. There are still a lot of sort of naysayers out there based on the device's price tag, and that's well understood. But I think a lot of people are missing the point. I'll have a lot to say, more to say on this next week, but a lot of people are missing the point. Apple's not meaning for this to be some majorly scaled product like the iPhone in year one. It's going to basically be a glorified dev kit, but it has sort of provided the glimpse of what's possible in terms of a new era of spatial computing, which is sort of what they're going for there. And on that mark, all of the reviews have sort of had this consistent chorus of this thing is damn cool. It's a glimpse into the future. It still has a lot of bugs. And of course, the price tag will inhibit its scale. But it has checked the box of its main objective, which is to demonstrate sort of what's possible at any cost. And from there, have years and years of evolution, costs coming down, device becoming sleeker and faster, et cetera. So its goal, I think, as I see it, and I think a lot of people are missing this point, has been met with what we're seeing so far. And I'm going to have more to say about this in a long essay. And then also, we're hopefully going to be able to try one on ourselves soon and report back.
So are you going to get one?
No, I'm going to wait, I think till Gen 2, but the Apple Store is taking appointments to go have sort of 20-minute demos with the device. So I'm going to go to my neighborhood Apple Store and try to get in line for that.
I could see you. I would be I would be disappointed if you didn't do that, Mike.
Right.
And I do think it always makes sense to wait for the second, third generation with Apple products. Now, is the first gen buyer going to be essentially their test bed feedback loop for iterations in future versions?
And
Okay.
I forgot to say another thing in the sort of won the week category is estimates from reliable sources point to about 200,000 units so far, which is very small in like Apple scale iPhone terms, but it is at the high end of analyst estimates so far, just in the opening weekend, and those are estimates for the whole year.
Yeah, okay.
So it's sort of
it doesn't seem
outperforming
small
already.
for something intended to be small,
Yeah,
If that's the
but
idea
it
of
will
small,
be.
Yeah.
To your question or what you were getting at, those people that buy the first year, it's going to be Apple fanboys, wealthy tech enthusiasts, and again, developers who want to start to feel it out. What should I be thinking about the future of like the way that UX should be changing for not these 2D environments, but 3D environments. And I think they want to get an early head start on if this thing does open up a new market of spatial computing, developers want to have an inside edge. And it's worth $3,500 for them to get that sort of dev kit.
And that sounds like a group that won't be shy about feedbacking on their experience.
True. Well, we'll hear a lot of feedback in the next coming days and months.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be very quick with mine. So this week, so who won the week in my view was the parents of children whose passing was blamed at some level on social media. We've all heard all these stories. This week there were hearings in the Senate, the usual sort of let's trot out the heads of the social media companies, give them their periodic ass whooping, on television. But in this particular, Meta was there, Discord was there, TikTok, and Snap. They were all there. They all gave their statements. I watched some of it, not all
and
of
X.
it.
Linda Yaccarino was there.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. X was the one I forgot. And also there were, the parents and siblings, et cetera, of some of these kids. And, they stood up, made their presence known. And so, in a way, they sort of had their day in court. Even though nothing was said. I'm not sure how they were acknowledged because, again, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did notice that. So, I think that's a notable who won the week. And this is not something I wade into normally, all the debate about, policy around social media and so on. It's not something we talk about much, but it was on today. I watched a bit of it. It was pretty compelling, and this was a compelling angle to it, certainly. Okay, Mike, do you want to read us out?
Sure. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been This Week in Local. Stay tuned every week for more episodes. You can find the show on all major podcast networks and find out more at localogy.com. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Your engagement helps others find us. And if you're interested in being a guest or sponsor, you can email us at podcast@localogy.com. So I'm Mike Boland with Charles Laughlin. Our producer is Dara Sweat. So thanks for listening and see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Localogy's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.